All right, if Michael Cohen didn't already totally destroy Bragg's prosecution, there's one potential witness. Now, Martha said there might not be any other witnesses called, but there is one who could deal the final blow, perhaps. Former Cohen legal advisor, unofficially, Bob Costello. He testified yesterday on Capitol Hill that Cohen insisted to him on multiple occasions over 2 hours that he had nothing on Donald Trump. Trump didn't do anything wrong. But that's not all. Costello brought that information to Bragg.
Why wouldn't Alvin Bragg talk to you? Why do you think?
You'd have to ask him that. But I talked to 8 of his assistant DAs.
What was that reception like?
When I testified in the grand jury, they did everything in their power not to ask me the questions that would elicit the exculpatory information.
And is this the same information you took to the Southern District of New York?
It is.
Same information. They were happy to get it.
Exactly.
What did they decide?
Well, they decided they did not use Michael Cohen for anything.
Wait, so based on that, it looks like Bragg didn't care that Cohen had no credibility as long as he would help him bring the case against Trump, which is stunning for a prosecutor to do. Joining us now is Bob Costello. Bob, great to see you. Have you been given any indication that you could be a witness in this trial?
No, that's not what's happened. I mean, obviously, they have to wait till the examination of Michael Cohen is over. Then I'm sure they're going to make a motion to try and get rid of this case. I'm also equally sure that this judge, although he should dismiss the case, won't. So then the question is poised for Todd Blanche to decide who he's going to call as a witness. I would think, in light of the testimony I gave yesterday down at the House, that I'm a very likely suspect, and I'm ready to go. I'm telling the truth. It's an easy story to tell, and I'm not concerned at all.
Well, when I was in the courtroom on Tuesday, and
that can't be believed.
Yeah, and Michael Cohen was asked about his various conversations with you, he kept the same, patter going, that he wasn't being completely forthcoming with you or forthcoming at all with you about Trump, because he hadn't retained you. You were asking for some exorbitant retainer. He hadn't retained you. He didn't quite like you, and he didn't quite trust you. That's what basically, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said on Tuesday. He was trying to protect the president. And to that you say?
Yeah. I read the transcript of Cohen on the way down to Washington, and virtually every single thing he said about me was a lie. And remember, it wasn't just me. I had my law partner who knew Michael Cohen for 10 years sitting next to me. When we saw him in the Regency Hotel, this guy was, by his own admission, suicidal, and he kept on saying, I'm looking for my escape route. Tell me how I can avoid this. Because 2 nights before, he said he was on the roof of the Regency ready to jump off. I didn't know whether to believe that or not, but I looked at my partner who knew him for 10 years, and he shook his head yes. He thought that Michael Cohen was telling the truth, that he was suicidal. And during that entire time that we met with him, but at his request, by the way, he didn't say I was sketchy as he testified. That's just nonsense. He also said that Rudy Giuliani was on board for that first meeting and that I was conspiring with Rudy Giuliani, that he was afraid that anything he said to me would go right to Rudy Giuliani. Well, in fact, Rudy Giuliani didn't represent Donald Trump for another 3 or 4 days. So he wasn't in the picture at all. Yet Michael voluntarily just lies and embellishes stories just to make himself look good. That's what he does.
Yeah, he was trying to say that you were back channeling to Trump. He was saying that you were back channeling through Giuliani to Trump, and that's how this was all going down. But I want to play an exchange or recount an exchange from the trial today. Bob, Todd Blanche, representing Trump, asked,
Sure.
Do you remember telling Costello that you had nothing on President Trump and could not cooperate? Cohen responded, no, sir. Blanche then asked, do you just not remember, or are you sure that you didn't say it? Cohen answered, I do not recall. That's kind of classic, right? I don't recall. These were pretty important moments in his life, right?
A very crucial moment in his life. He was thinking about killing himself. And we made it clear to him that there was a way to solve his problems if he had truthful information about Donald Trump, because that's clearly where the Southern District was going. Then I told him, if that's the case, I can get you out of your legal problems by the end of the week. And every time I brought it up, he said, I swear to God, Bob, this is a quote, I swear to God, Bob, I don't have anything on Donald Trump. But I kept on coming back to it to make sure that he knew that this was the way out if he wanted it and if he had truthful information. The bottom line is he didn't have truthful information. He kept on saying during that same meeting, he would pound his fist on the table, point his finger at Jeff Citron and myself, and he'd say, guys, I want you to know I will do whatever the F I have to do. I will never spend one day in jail. Well, he spent more than one day in jail, and he blames Donald Trump for that. Now, I wondered, though, why he would go out of his way, because he explained the $130,000 transaction was all his idea. He said Donald Trump had nothing to do with it. I said, why would you take this burden on? Right. He said, I knew when I spoke to, I'm sorry, somebody yelled in my ear. I knew when I spoke to Stormy Daniels' lawyer that she was going to say she had sex with Donald Trump. He said, I didn't believe that allegation at all, but I knew it would be embarrassing to Melania. He said, so I decided that I would take care of this. Now, why would a guy decide to take care of something like that? During later conversations, Michael revealed that he was very annoyed at the fact that when Trump got elected, the entire inner circle went from New York down to Washington, D.C., except for one person, Donald, our friend Michael Cohen. They left him behind. It was clear that he was blaming Jared and Ivanka because he kept on bad-mouthing them, although he didn't specifically say it was their fault that I didn't go to Washington. But I said to him one time, I said, Michael, what do you think would have happened if you went to Washington? What job were you looking for? Believe it or not, he said, oh, I think I could have been Attorney General of the United States, or at least, I swear to God.
That's funny.
Or at least Chief of Staff to the President. I mean, I looked at the guy and I thought, you know, he's delusional. This guy has no sense of his self-worth or lack thereof.
Well, he's insecure.
So he was obsessed. So this was his way. But doing this payment and taking care of this was his way of getting himself back into the good graces of Donald Trump, because he could then go to Trump afterwards and say, boss, that's what he called him. You know, you could have had a big embarrassing problem, but I, Michael Cohen, took care of it. That's Bob, what he was doing. Yeah.
Bob, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much for you're like an old New York storyteller. Like, you actually tell a story that people can follow. I don't mean a story, but facts that you can follow, and we really appreciate you taking some time tonight. I know it is the truth. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.